Ow. Hello, hello, hello. Hello and welcome. What? This is ever not going to be awkward. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It is Friday the 29th of July. How are we nearly in August? Can someone tell me how this year is going so fast? It's madness. So yeah, it is Friday, which means it is leg day. I'm gonna probably film my leg session now, hopefully throw something together that is somewhat entertaining. A little bit of an update, I suppose. So last week you will have seen one of my high carb days, which we're actually not running this week, because when I did my check-in with my coach yesterday, I just explained that I don't really like high days. Like, it's great because you get to eat a bit more food, but when you're this deep into a prep, like, no matter how much food you eat, you're never like satisfied. It doesn't really fill you up. So it doesn't really change anything in that sense. If anything, it just makes you hungrier. So there's that. But also on the Sunday, so I have high days on the Friday and the Saturday. Excuse me. I am just fucked, like royally fucked. I feel worse on the Sunday than I do on normal days after 2 high days. I feel ravenous. I feel fucking just knackered. Yeah, just exhausted. Like, my body feels super heavy. I'm super tired. I'm super like irritable. I just feel awful, and my digestion wasn't great either. Rude. I said to him that I'm not really a fan, and if we weren't going to do them, I wouldn't mind. But also because that was the structure that he was wanting to do for my first peak week, which is just over 3 weeks out. Well, my show day is just over 3 weeks out. Peak week will start in just over 2 weeks. So that's crazy how fast it's going. But this was the approach that he wanted to take in terms of peaking me for this first show, based off of my feedback and me telling him how shit I feel on a Sunday after doing it that way. We're probably not going to do that. We're probably just going to go with like a linear load where we'll slowly increase carbs across the week, and I think my body will respond a lot better to that. And I think that's what we did in 2019 in my later shows as well. So no high days this week. My weight has been very stable at like in the 139s for the past 2 or 3 weeks, I think. I did jinx myself for my check-in yesterday because I was like, I'm defo gonna get a new low today. I'm gonna be like 138, and I was like 140. All in all, I'm feeling really good. So after the high days, I did a check-in with my coach on Sunday. Pretty much I'm like ready from the front. We actually don't want my quads to really get any leaner because they're starting to get like decent lines in them, which I fucking love. I'd love nothing more than to have like deep lines in my quads, but that's not what the criteria is. So I'm pretty much ready from the front, but there needs to, like, there's a lot more, not a lot more, but there's quite a bit more to come off my hamstrings and my glutes still, so we do have to push on for fat loss. So we did have a food drop on Sunday, and I am on the lowest I've ever been. Like, I've never been on such low calories. I am on a meal plan, so I'm not given the macros or anything, but I just put it into my fitness pal and calculated it because I'm curious and I want to know. So it is the lowest that I'm on so far, and I was a bit apprehensive that I'd really struggle or I'd notice that, but I've actually felt really good. Like, my hunger's been really manageable. I haven't been overly fatigued or overly tired. I've just felt, you know, pretty decent. So I'm in a pretty good spot. I think the only thing I'm kind of experiencing occasionally is like my legs are quite tired, my legs are quite sore, my hips hurt, so I'm going to try and get on top of my mobility a little bit more. So I need to practice my posing quite a lot. So yeah, that is the plan moving forward. So I'm going to go in and get this leg session done. I think it's one of those days where I need a monster. I think I need one. It's one of those days where I just feel a bit like meh. I think the deeper you get into prep, the less you care about the way you look as well. Like, I have just realized that I haven't actually changed like this random top that I put on to lounge in. I haven't even changed that. Yeah, I'm just it's just one of those get in and get it done kind of days. So this morning basically I went and got my steps done in the morning, not all of them, just like 5,000, because I warm up on the treadmill and that gets a lot of steps done. Did my meal prep, watched a webinar, and then also did a load of work this morning. And now I'm here at the gym. So I'll take you through my leg session, and then I'm sure I'll catch up with you in a bit. So wish me luck. Okay, so I thought I would do a voiceover for this session, and it is a Saturday evening. I have just eaten my post-workout. I am feeling pretty tired, so I'm going to do my best, but I've already kind of fucked it because I literally have just recorded all of this once already, but I had the wrong setting for the microphone. So I'm doing it again for you. So I really hope that you enjoy this and hopefully it's useful. So I started this session off with 10 minutes on the treadmill. So I do this before every workout. It's a great way to get some more steps to hit my 10K target. And also it's great for warming up the body. So gets your heart rate up, gets your body warm, and gets you prepared for the session, gets you in the right headspace basically. So I tend to just kind of reply to client messages when I'm on the treadmill, and then I can get stuck in. So after that, in this particular session, I actually did a bit more mobility than I normally would. So I will always do a little bit before I get stuck into the session, but my hips have been pretty sore lately. My legs have been pretty tired, so I thought it would be a good idea to spend a bit more time doing a bit of mobility so that I could have a good session. And obviously, because I'm filming it, it looks better because I highly recommend that you should do your mobility. So I started with some leg swings front to back, and then sideways I did some quad stretches, some hamstring stretches, and some hip stretches. After that, I've completely forgotten, but I did some other stretches, particularly focusing on my hips and my adductors, which is an area that's quite tight for me. So once I get into the session, if I haven't kind of mobilized my hips, then I find it really hard to like contract my glutes, for example. So if I can kind of loosen off my hip flexors and my quads a little bit more, I find it a lot easier to contract that muscle. So that's something that I did just before this session, as you can see. I also foam rolled my legs a little bit in this session, or before this session as well, just a little bit, just to try and relieve some kind of tension in the area, because to be honest, I mean, in these stretches I actually look quite flexible, but I'm not. My quads are pretty flexible and my ankles are pretty mobile, but even though I've got pretty flexible quads, they're still pretty tight. Like, to be honest, they're really fucking tight and they hurt a lot. So I tried to loosen them off a little bit with the foam roller. I also used the Theragun at home the night before, and I really think it helped because this session was actually really, really good. I didn't get as much pain in my hips either, so that's a massive win. So I'm gonna try and keep on top of this mobility. We will see though, sometimes I'm a little bit short on time, so I just try and do my best, but something is better than nothing. And then I just finished off with some walking lunges to try and get a bit more blood into the area and get them warmed up. After that, I write out my session. So every session, before I get stuck in, I write out my session, I look at the numbers that I did before, and then I write down what I'm looking to do this time around. And yes, that is my grimy shirt that I forgot to change, and I think that's probably oats that are down it. So the first exercise is glute kickback. So this used to be adductor, but I felt like I wasn't really working my glutes, to be honest, and that was making my hips worse. So I wanted to incorporate this instead. I do have adductor on a different day, so it works out quite well. So with this particular movement, I'm really focusing on bracing my core. So I don't want to be arching my back at all with this. I don't want to use my lower back. I want to use my glute. So every time, just before I lift my leg up, I'm going to contract my core, I'm going to brace, and then I'm going to really think about squeezing my bum muscle. I like to keep my legs straight because then my hip flex and my quad doesn't get too tight, and I can again contract my glute better. And then I also turn my toes out to the side a little bit, heel in, because I find that I'm able to squeeze my glutes a bit more effectively that way as well. So driving my foot backwards and stretching my leg out, and then contracting my glute when I'm doing these. Second up is leg extensions. So I do 2 sets on here, one set of 12 to 15, one set of 8 to 10. Before the leg extension, or when I do the working set on the leg extension, I always wear wrist straps. So by doing this, I can basically pull myself into the seat more and stabilize myself more. And that way, when I'm driving my feet up, I'm able to get a better contraction on my quads. So if I wasn't using straps, I'd be struggling to hold myself down. My hips would be lifting up. If my hips are lifting up, I'm not getting a very good contraction on my quads, and it'll just piss me off, to be honest. So use straps because it'll allow you to pull yourself into the seat a bit more, and you'll just get a lot more from the movement. So along with that, I'm pointing my toes up towards the ceiling, pulling myself into the seat, and I'm really thinking about contracting my quads as hard as I possibly can, shortening that muscle, and that being the reason that my feet are coming up. What you don't want to do is kind of kick your legs up and be really explosive, because you're not going to be using your quads effectively. You really want to think about the fact that because you're shortening that muscle, that's the reason that your feet are coming up. And you want to hold it for a second at the top to make sure you really are getting the most out of that movement and you're squeezing it as hard as possible. And then when you're coming down, you want a nice, slow, controlled movement, and you want to stop that movement just before the weight stack touches, because if that touches, we lose tension. So this particular machine doesn't give me as much stretch as I would like, because I have to stop it just before that weight touches, but you always want to be controlling the eccentric, no matter what movement. After this, we go on to some lying leg curls. So I'm just adjusting the machine here so that the pad rests on the back of my ankles, basically a little bit higher than that. Feels pretty good for me. And with this particular movement, we do 2 sets, so 1 set of 8 to 10, 1 set of 12 to 15. And with this movement, what I'm thinking about is contracting my glutes, pushing my hips into the pad. So if I'm squeezing my glutes and pushing my hips into the pad, that's going to make sure that I'm stable, and it's also going to prevent my lower back from helping out here. What we don't want to do is our bum to like raise towards the ceiling and our back to arch, because we're not effectively working the hamstrings because our lower back is helping us. So the moment your hips start to raise away from that pad, you either want to re-engage the glutes and push your hips into the pad again, or you want to stop the movement if you're unable to do that. So we're bringing the heels up to the bum, keeping the hips down, contracting the back of the legs. So the next movement is normally a squat press, but the machine was taken and the guy who was on it was probably going to be on it for a while, so I chose to do the Bulgarian Smith split squats first instead. Now, if you're changing the order of a movement, it's not the end of the world, but it will mean that you might be a little bit weaker in the movement you would have done before, just because you're accumulating a bit more fatigue through the session. But to be honest, me doing these first actually probably felt better than they would if I did them after the squat press. So with this movement, I always set the bench up in exactly the same place. I have like a mental note of where I put that. I always rest it against that 20 plate, so it's always the same. I'm very particular like this. And then I'm placing the foot that's in front, so the one that's on the floor. That is a good position for me. Like, you can have it further back and that way you'll get more knee bend and you'll hit your quads more, or you can have it further forward and you'll get more basically hip bend and you'll get more glutes and hamstrings. But I think with split squats, it's just preference. Like, find a position that feels comfortable for you, that you're able to get as much range of motion as possible, and you'll get into the bottom and your knee isn't traveling backwards. That's the most important thing. And that's if you choose to do them, because these are the fucking devil, to be honest, but they actually felt pretty good this time around. So nice, slow, controlled movement, getting as low as I can, making sure that I'm not twisting my hips either when I'm doing this. So toilet trip, in this session we had like 8 to 10 reps. I think this was number 6 of the day. And then I got stuck into the squat press. So I've recently moved back to this particular machine. I was doing like a Cybex 45-degree leg press, but it really aggravated my hips. And then I was doing the hack squat for a little bit, but again, it was still aggravating my hips. So I moved back to this machine and it actually felt really, really good. So again, I'm kind of pulling myself into the seat here. I'm placing my feet as low as I can while still allowing myself as much range of motion as possible and keeping my feet flat and my lower back flat on the pad. I'm then getting as low as I possibly can, keeping good control on the eccentric. And what I'm doing is, as I'm bringing that weight towards me, I'm starting to breathe in, I'm starting to brace, but then when I transition the weight, that's when I'm bracing my hardest, because that is essentially the hardest point where you're suddenly having to change direction. So you want to make sure that you're really, really tightening your stomach, you're bracing as hard as you possibly can, you're pulling yourself into the seat, and then obviously you're driving the weight away from you. So this particular machine is a beauty, so I'm really glad to be using it again. But as you can see, it's killer. I actually don't think that looks as hard as it was. I feel like I probably could have got another one out. So maybe next time. So after that, I go back onto the leg extension again. So at this point in the session, I'm not going to be able to work my quads as effectively as I would at the start, because at the start, your quads are fresh. You're going to find it a lot easier to get them short, basically. But later on in the session, this is just good to have in there to accumulate a bit more volume. So this particular set is a double drop. So what I'm doing is one set of 12 to 15, then I'm dropping the weight by about 30%, I'm going to failure. Then again, I'm dropping the weight by about 30% and I'm going to failure. So if I had 60 kilos to start with, I'm dropping it by about 20 kilos each time. When I'm doing these drop sets, I'm still focusing on keeping good form. I'm still controlling the movement. I'm contracting the muscle as hard as possible. And I'm basically maintaining my composure. I mean, it doesn't look like it because these burn like a bitch, but I'm still trying my best to control the movement. So you don't want to rush through them. You still want to get the most out of them because it is a seriously good way of accumulating some good volume on your quads and just kind of finishing them off. And you will get a hell of a good pump from doing this kind of stuff. So give it a try. If you can power through, the burn and the pain, it is well worth it. So like I said, you get a pretty sick pump from it. So if you get a chance, give it a try. After this, I had an all-time PB of 10 wheeze in one session. I know, it's impressive, right? But that's prep for you. You know, when you're drinking 8 to 9 litres of water a day, you do 10 wheeze in one leg session. So yeah. And then after that all-time PB, I went on to do a double drop set on the seated leg curl as well. So obviously the seated leg curl is just a slightly different variation of a hamstring curl. So with this particular one, once again, I did 12 to 15 reps and then I did 2 drop sets. Exactly the same way I just described the leg extension. With this particular setup, like what I'm doing is basically pushing my lower back into that pad. I'm making sure that my lower back always has contact with that pad behind my back. I'm kind of crunching down and I'm pushing myself into the pad with that handles section in front of me, and this allows me to keep as much stability as possible, which means I'm able to work my hamstrings as effectively as possible. And when I'm doing it, I'm driving my heels towards my bum, I'm squeezing really hard for a second there, and then I'm slowly bringing the weight back up. So you want control on the eccentric, you don't just want to fling it all the way back up, and you want to get a full stretch at the top of the movement as well. So like I said, lower back remains pressed against that pad. The moment it comes away is basically my lower back coming in to help. My hamstrings are becoming too fatigued to work properly, and that's not a point that I want to get to. I don't want my lower back to do the movement, I want my hamstrings to do the movement. So if I can't kind of like regain composure and crunch down anymore and stop that from happening, then the set is done basically. So try this as well, you'll get a hella good pump, but it will burn like a bitch. After that, I went on to hyperextensions. So with hyperextensions, you can work your lower back or you can work your glutes and your hamstrings. It just depends on what you want to focus on. So what I'm hitting here is my glutes and my hamstrings. And the way I'm doing this is I'm rounding my torso. I'm thinking about shortening my hamstrings, squeezing my glutes, and pressing my thighs into that pad. I'm not trying to get my torso as high up as it can possibly go. I'm just thinking about squeezing those muscles, and that's why my torso is coming up. We don't want to like arch the back and get as high as possible. That's not the goal here. And I don't know about anyone else, but these make me hella dizzy. So when I get off them, I need to give myself like 5 to 10 minutes, just 10 minutes? No, not that long. 5 to 10 seconds just to regain my composure. Otherwise, you know, I'll probably walk into my own reflection. So I think that's pretty normal, you know, after doing something like this. So if that is you, just give yourself 10 seconds or so after the movement just to get your head straight basically. But yeah, that was the session. So that actually went really, really quickly. Hopefully it was helpful and I hope you enjoyed. I've got the lens like propped up on a bit of tissue right now. So let's just pretend that I did do calves and I just ran out of battery, or I just forgot to film them, or I didn't film them because calves are boring as shit. Let's just pretend that's what happened and not that I actually just skipped them like I always do. Okay, so that leg session was actually one of the best leg sessions I've had in a very fucking long time. I don't know if it's because I've been recording it for you guys, but I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. I'm only like 2 meals in as well, so it's not like I've got a high day or anything like that where I would feel particularly energetic, but I don't know, it was a good session. I wasn't like crazy strong or anything like that, but I just enjoyed it. Normally, I struggle with legs because I just get a lot of hip pain. I've had hip pain for literally like 4 years now. Still not completely sure what's the cause of it. I think they're potentially overactive, and then my glutes are a bit underactive, and then when I do anything it's just like they're firing up. But it could also be that my lower abdominals are quite weak, because they are. So I'm not too sure, but I did a little bit more mobility, which you will have seen, and I kind of foam rolled my legs. I also used the Theragun at home on them last night, so maybe that just loosened them off a little bit more and allowed me to just train with a little more comfort. But yeah, normally my leg sessions kind of get me down a little bit, because first of all they're painful and also my legs, in my opinion, are a weak area. I'm actually really disappointed with how they're looking at the moment and in this prep. Like, they look good in terms of condition. At this same weight last prep they still had a lot of fat on them compared to now, so they're a lot more conditioned, which means they probably have grown a little bit. But just looking at them, I just think they look, there's always fucking seagulls here. This is why I park up here, because then my car doesn't get shat on. What was I saying? Shit, what was I saying? Oh yeah, my legs. So yeah, I'm just really disappointed with how they're looking this time around, because I've spent 2 years in an off season, right, and I've fucking grafted. I have grafted, especially with my legs, and I feel like they're smaller. And they're always going to be an area that I'm going to have doubt around, and I'm always going to want them bigger. They're probably bigger than they need to be for figure. It's always been an area that I want to grow, even before like I got into competitive bodybuilding, and they will be an area that I focus on when I come away from competitive bodybuilding. But yeah, I'm just a bit disappointed after all the effort that I've put in over 2 years that they haven't grown more. And that is because I did run into issues with my knees. It is because I've got issues with my hips. But it also is because I went down to like 4 days of training, so we only ever had like 1 full leg day. And I do think that impacted it a little bit. And we only started introducing more legs at the start of this year. So that's probably why. But it is what it is. I'm gonna try not to overanalyze it. I'm getting quite good in terms of this time round, this prep. I'm not really over analysing my physique too much. I'm feeling just pretty chill about it all. Occasionally I'll see people online who I know I'm probably going to come up against, and I'm like, fuck, and I start comparing myself. But you know, that's why it's best to kind of steer clear of those kind of things, potentially even mute those accounts if they make you feel like that. But I'm not having to do that just yet. But perhaps when we get closer to the comps and the finals, I'll start like looking up people, which is what you tend to do, and that's what I did before Worlds last time. And to be fair, it wouldn't have changed my placing, but I saw the girl who did win. She actually won like 3 categories, or she placed top 3 in 3 different categories. But when I saw her, because I was looking up all the different competitors before stepping on stage, when I saw her I was like, she's won, hands down, I'm not beating her. And I was right, but that's not a great mindset to have. That's not a great fuck me, you were so close to my car. That's not a great headspace to have going into a comp. You want to go in with confidence, you want to go in feeling good about your physique and what you're presenting, and not have that kind of worry, because that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Anyway, I'm fucking waffling. I need to go home and eat some grub. My post-workout oats today, which is one of my favourite meals, but the problem with it being post-workout is that I'm starving, and I have to kind of pace myself and try and slow down. So I will catch you in a bit. Hopefully you enjoyed this workout.